Okay, guys, this is a very popular JavaScript interview question that I gave out. So let's walk through this, and I'll show you three different ways. Okay. So what is range count? It's going to take in three arguments: the start, the stop, and the increment, defaulting to 1, right? So if you pass in 1, 10, and 2, it's going to count from 1 to 10, but incrementing by 2 each time. So we have 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, like this. Okay, let's start off with the easiest case scenario where the increment is only 1. If the increment is only 1, it's actually pretty simple. You can do something like, let's say, const ARR is equal to a new array. Okay? And for new array, you actually don't need the keyword new, but I always like to leave it in there. Okay, now, how long do we want the length to be? Well, if the increment is just 1, the length is actually just the stop or the maximum minus the minimum or start, and then plus 1. Okay. Now, this will create a sparse array. So I'll just fill it with an empty string like this. Okay. And actually, let me change this const to let. So this will be a little bit easier. So now you can just say ARR is now equal to ARR.map, but we're also going to use the value and the index. Okay. And then what are we going to return? Well, we're just going to return the index plus, not the value plus the start, like this. Okay. And then down here, let's console.log ARR. Let's see what we get on the right. See, so we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like this. Now, this would not work if the step is 2 or if we're doing negative things. Okay. Now, let's try when it's 2. So we should get this array, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. But how do we do that? So I'm going to comment all of this out. I'm going to create a new array, const ARR, and I'm going to populate the first value with the starting number like this, because they all start with that number. Also, I'll create another variable, let count is equal to increment, and we're going to see why. Okay, and now I'm going to paste in my while loop, just because if I type it, this is going to run forever. Okay. All right, so let me make this a little bit nicer. Okay, so this while loop, what is this thing inside here? This thing inside says, hey, this while loop will run as long as the current last value in your array, that's this part. So if the current value plus the increment is less than or equal to our maximum stop number, then we'll run this code. And then we're going to push our ARR, we're going to push the starting value, which is 1, okay, plus the count, right, which is 2 right now. So that's how we got our 3 here. And then our count has to be increased by the increment. And yes, you need the count or else it's not going to work properly. You cannot do increment equals increment times 2 or increment plus increment. That actually does not work. So you actually need to do it this way. So does this work for every single thing? Let's try this. Okay, that works. Now, it's not going to work for the negative numbers. See? Okay, let's figure out how to make it work for the negative numbers. So to make this work for both positive and negative numbers, it's actually really simple. The only thing we're changing is what's inside of this while loop. So I'm going to paste it. You see this formula, it's actually the same as our first formula. But our first formula, right, we didn't have to divide by the increment because the increment was 1. And anything divided by 1 is the same number. But down here, we have to do that. And you see now that it's working backwards as well as like forward. So let me do count from 2 to 24, and let's count by 2s. See, it works. But it doesn't work sometimes. So let me see. If we count from 3 to, let's say, 14, right? And we're counting by 2s. You see that it has a 15, but we're supposed to stop at or below 14. We're not supposed to go above. So what's going on? Well, that's because of this formula here. Stop minus start, 14 minus 3 is 11, which is a prime number. When you try to divide 11 by 2, you get a decimal. Okay, so that's why this is not working properly. All right, now there's a few ways to fix this. I'll show you the quickest way. I can wrap this like this and then use math.floor, but you can also use the double tilde like this. See, and now it works. We don't see the 15. So with positive numbers, using this double tilde will actually be the same thing as using math.floor, okay? But it's a lot shorter to type. Okay, so this works for everything, right? Positive step counting and negative step counting. But I want to show you one final way where we can do all of this in 2 lines or even 1 line if we really wanted to. Let's do that. So I will once again comment all of this out. Now I'm going to do const AR is equal to array.from. Now array.from takes in 3 arguments. The first argument has to be an object with the length property. This will create an array with whatever length that you put here. And unlike the new array constructor, creating array from array.from will have its value as undefined instead of empty. So it's not a sparse array. So this will let you use .map through it. Okay? So we know we want the length to be stop minus start divided by increment plus 1. And note, we don't need to use the double tilde or math.floor because array.from will actually round all of your decimals for you because it knows it cannot create an array with a length that is not a whole number. So it's actually smart enough to do that. Whereas new array is not smart enough to do that. It will give you an error if it calculates and you get like a decimal length or something like that. Okay. Now, the second argument inside array.from is actually the map function that will run over the values of the array that you just created in the first argument. Right? So I'll use an arrow function. I'm going to use the underscore for the values, right? Because we're not going to use the values, but we are going to use the index, which I'll call IDX. And then what are we returning? Well, we're going to return the index, right, times the start. Okay. And then down here, let me console.log. Oh, times increment plus start, like this. All right. So we're counting from 3 to 14, counting by 2s. You see that it works? And this works because at first, the index will be 0. So 0 times any number is 0. And then you just have the plus start. So you always start with the right number. Okay. And then how do we get the 5? Well, index now is 1, right? So 1 times the increment. What's the increment? The increment is 2. So 1 times 2 is 2, right? Plus the start, which is 3. So 2 plus 3 is 5, right? So just by leveraging basic math, we can actually do all of this in a one-liner like this. And let's test this for the negatives. Okay, let's test this with the bigger one. So we want to count from 51 to 3, going by -3s. Yep. Okay. And since 51 is divisible by 3, it ends in a 3. Cool, right? All right, I hope all of this was helpful. Now, if you get this question in an interview, you should actually just use this one and then explain it. Okay? And then you can refactor to this